What is a demon? When I slaughter every heartless person in this world, I become the demon. In my previous life, as the demon emperor, I fought alone against the favored child of fate, all for the sake of saving a world that harbored only hostility toward me. Yet, in the end, I died by the sword of the one I loved most. The very path I protected turned out to be the cause of my demise. Now, reborn once again. This time, I fight for myself. I will show the world. When faced with someone who has no ties to hold them back, that so-called child of fate is nothing more than a toy in my hands. Even the pinnacle of this world will vanish like smoke in the wind. On the day I returned to the Hall of Judgment, I knelt, draped in a dark green robe, under the Grand Hall. Before me stood an elder, embodying the grace and demeanor of an immortal. Yet his eyes burned with disappointment and fury. "Yumu! The matter has reached this point, and your junior sister stands as witness. Do you still not see the error of your ways?" The elder's voice was harsh and filled with anger. Even now, he could not believe that the most esteemed prodigy of Yunhi sect could commit such an unthinkable act. Yes, senior brother. Just admit it. Even if we ignore the facts, the Earth Vein's energy has indeed been stolen. 13 of her fellow disciples died tragically because of it. Besides you, no one else could have the capability to do this. A delicate young girl in a green robe stood by the elder's side, her expression full of trepidation as she spoke. Yet in her heart, she thought, such a major incident within the sect, with the Earth Vein under the care of us true disciples, as long as senior brother takes responsibility, we won't have to face punishment. Moreover, the sect has always valued senior brother highly. Even if he takes the blame, he wouldn't face severe punishment. Suddenly, as I had kept my eyes shut, I slowly opened them and raised my gaze. My eyes were filled with indifference and the weight of the ages, and carried a commanding presence that made hearts tremble. Yunhi sect, the place where it all began. I never thought I'd return. Is this heaven's way of saving itself? Seeing my unyielding demeanor, or perhaps angered by the fact that he was just shaken by the gaze of someone so young, the elder's rage flared instantly. "You wretch! Do you still dare to defy? Someone, fetch me the King Yun spear." He merely thought I had lost control and fallen into madness. That even after killing 13 disciples, my bloodlust remained unchecked. Yet, as the treasurer of Yunhi sect himself, he knew the importance of someone like me, the sect's chief prodigy. That's why today, he had to knock sense into me. "It's unnecessary. I spoke. I admit it. It was me who did it." As I said this, I slowly stood up, my eyes clear, yet with a detachment from worldly matters. In my past life, no matter how hard I tried to prove my innocence, in the end, most people never believed me. In this life, I don't wish to fight over right or wrong anymore. You truly admit your guilt? The Yunhi sect leader's breath caught. Something felt off, but he couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was. "Yes, I admit my wrongdoing. Please, sect master, punish me as you see fit." I clasped my hands in salute, but my body remained upright, my gaze directly meeting that of the Yunhi sect leader and the 2 other elders seated above. I was indeed wrong to have ever acted for the sake of this sect, for this world, for the one I loved. I fought alone against the child of fate. My mistake was being the demon emperor, yet harboring too much love and attachment for this world. But what did I receive in return? At the moment of my final victory, a fatal strike from the one I loved most, stabbing me in the back. "You may admit your guilt, but the sect has its rules. Considering your past merits, and the fact that this was caused by losing control, you will serve a month's punishment in the cold prison, as a warning to others." The sect master looked at me, his eyes filled with regret. I was originally his chosen successor for the Yunhi sect. To have this happen now truly left him heartbroken. 2 disciples from the Hall of Judgment immediately approached and seized me. I didn't resist, but my body remained completely still. Seeing this, The sect master looked at me, somewhat puzzled. Do you still have something to say? Don't worry. After this, you will still be the chief prodigy of Yunhe's sect. No one will say anything. The sect master assumed I was worried about my future. But I simply shook my head and said, since the sect has its rules, according to the law, I should be stripped of my cultivation and expelled from the sect. That would be the true warning for others. As soon as I finished speaking, the sect master's face turned pale. Even the young girl in the green robe standing nearby looked at me in terror, thinking in panic. Though she had testified that senior brother had committed the deed, senior brother couldn't leave. Otherwise, who would look after her? Nonsense! The Uni sect master roared angrily. Do not push your luck. Someone, take him away. This is Yunhe sect's chief prodigy after all. Yumu carried the hopes of the sect. But he wasn't like this before. There was something strange about the whole matter. Could I have wronged him after all? With this thought, the sect master's tone softened. He assumed I was merely dissatisfied. If you are innocent, I will personally get to the bottom of this. There's no need to mention leaving the sect again. You were raised here at Uni sect by your master, Elder Zilly. Since you were young, Uni sect is your home. If your master hears of this, wouldn't it break her heart? Go now! Hearing the name of my master, Zilly, I recalled in my previous life how she once looked at me, saying the smell of blood on me made her sick. In response, the emotionless expression on my face finally revealed a hint of mockery. I had half a mind to leave right away, cutting all ties with this place. But it wasn't up to me to refuse. And so this matter seemed to have been settled. The disciples, including those from the Hall of Judgment and even the young girl in green, all sighed in relief. That's great, senior brother. I knew the sect master would forgive you. Seeing that I had been spared harsh punishment, the young girl in green threw herself into my arms with joy. Her warmth and fragrance filled the space between us, but I immediately pushed her away. Don't come near me again. Who is your senior brother? Without sparing her another glance, I turned and followed the two disciples from the Hall of Judgment toward the cold prison. But I never expected to find myself heading to the cold prison. In my past life, I had stubbornly refused to admit guilt, desperately trying to prove my innocence. But in the end, all that awaited me was the Thunder Prison. Now that I've admitted guilt, things have turned out like this. For a moment, I didn't know whether to feel pity or contempt for my past self. Even though I no longer care, the memories still surge in like an unstoppable tide, flooding my mind. In my previous life, I had faced the child of fate, Yi Ping, almost alone. For thousands of years, I had held my ground, but almost no one believed in me. Not even my master, my senior sister, or my junior sister, nor the sect I considered family. They all followed the child of fate. Step by step, they forced me down a dead-end road. What use was it that I ascended to the throne of the demon emperor? What did it matter that no one could kill me? I was about to win. Yi Tian's lifeblood was already in my hands. All it would have taken was one strike of my spear, and it would have all been over. But in the end, the person I loved and respected most, at that crucial moment, stabbed me from behind with her sword. When she twisted the blade in my back, it was I who gave up my will to live. And then what? The child of fate, Yi Tia, ascended to immortality, sacrificing this world in a blood ritual for his greater path. He didn't take a single person with him. I wonder if those who followed him, the ones I protected again and again, only for them to turn on me, were reduced to ashes in his blood ritual. Did they regret it? Did they finally realize who the real demon was? Now I sit cross-legged in the cold prison, with my cultivation sealed. I cannot resist the bone-chilling cold, but even though the cold bites at my flesh, it still doesn't compare to the coldness in my heart. So I've returned, fine. I glanced at my long, slender fingers, still as clean as ever, clean enough that there wasn't even a trace of blood. This time, I want to live for myself. Even if it's just a single mortal life, it will be enough. I don't want to carry so many burdens anymore. I'm tired. Outside the cold prison, Liu He stared blankly at the figure inside. Being battered by the wind and snow, she had not yet entered the cold prison. But the icy air seeping out already made her small face turn pale. Her delicate appearance was truly pitiful. Why? Her eyes glistened with tears. Earlier, when she had thrown herself into my arms, it was the first time I had pushed her away so harshly. She had been in Yunhe's sect for 10 years now. No matter what mistakes she had made, senior brother had never spoken a harsh word to her. But this time, she felt the disgust and disdain, even though I hadn't expressed it outright. Could it be because she testified that senior brother had stolen the earth vein's energy and killed 13 of his fellow disciples? But she clearly saw the back of the person who committed the murders, and it looked so much like senior brother's. Those 13 disciples were all at the mid-foundation establishment stage. Who else but senior brother, a golden core stage cultivator, could have wiped them out in such a short time? Liu He gritted her teeth. It can't be wrong. It had to be senior brother, greedy for the earth vein's energy. Even though I didn't witness it myself, that back looked so much like his. It must have been him. My testimony can't be wrong. Besides, if I hadn't testified, I would have been punished as well. Senior brother would never let me suffer punishment, Liu He thought to herself. And with that, she felt much more at ease. She even began to consider whether she should bring a bowl of hot soup to senior brother in the cold prison. After all, senior brother had never refused anything she brought. Even if it was something he didn't want, he would surely be happy, since it would show that she cared about him. But just then, a voice transmission suddenly echoed in Liu He's ear. Here, come to the main hall. It was the voice of her master, Zili Immortal. Liu He left at once. As the youngest supreme elder of Yunhe sect, Immortal Zili was known for her strictness. Liu He didn't have much talent. She had only become Zili's disciple by sheer luck. If it hadn't been for me helping her with her cultivation and speaking up for her, she wouldn't have been able to stay in the sect this long. After Liu He left, the two disciples guarding the cold prison exchanged disdainful glances. Everyone in Yunhe's sect knew that Liu He was just a pretty face. For years, she had acted arrogantly, offending many people. But with my protection, and the fact that she was Immortal Zili's disciple, not to mention her good looks, there were still plenty of followers who fawned over her. Though others couldn't stand her, no one dared say anything. Do you think that business with the earth vein was really senior brother Yu's doing? One disciple whispered. Though the matter had been kept under wraps, there were always clues. The other disciple scoffed. Not a chance. Senior brother Yu is far beyond such things. He's at the peak of golden core formation, on the verge of breaking through to nascent soul stage. Sure, the earth vein's energy is valuable, but it's nothing to him. But it wouldn't be of much use to him. Besides, even if senior brother Yu wanted it, he wouldn't need to steal it. All he'd have to do is ask Elder Zili. What would he lack? Honestly, after all these years, who in the sect doesn't know what kind of person senior brother Yu is? How could you even ask such a question? But junior sister Liu He testified herself. She said she saw senior brother Yu doing it. A traitor, that's what she is. With her low level of cultivation, if senior brother Yu really wanted to do something, do you think he'd let her see it? I tell you, even the sect master is being foolish about this. Careful what you say. Careful! Meanwhile, inside the Hall of Judgment, due to my case, many elders and masters of Yunhe sect, including the sect master himself, had gathered. At that moment, Zili looked at her disciple, Liu He. She knew the girl was calculative, but she didn't believe Liu He would slander anyone, nor did she think Liu He had the courage to lie. That's why, during my earlier interrogation, Zili had kept her distance to avoid suspicion. Liu He, tell us exactly what happened that day. It was the Yunhe sect supreme elder, Yun Buki, who spoke. He had once wanted to take me as his disciple, But I was an orphan taken in by Zilly during her travels. He couldn't win me over. No matter what, he refused to believe I could do such a thing. He had even questioned Zilly, accusing her of negligence. But Zilly had simply retorted, "Is Moore your disciple or mine?" Shutting him down instantly. Faced with such a large audience, Liu He trembled slightly, but still recounted everything she had seen in exact detail. Rubbish! Before anyone else could respond, Yun Buki flew into a rage. You dared to testify based on just a silhouette? And let's not even talk about the fact that Yumu is your senior brother. For 10 years, how has he treated you? Yumu is the designated successor of Yunhee's sect. What is his status? Is he someone you dare to slander? The sect master and the 5 other hall masters all wore grim expressions. Earlier, Liu He had spoken with such certainty, claiming she had witnessed Yumu committing murder. Who would have thought it was merely a similar silhouette? If this matter caused Yumu to grow cold toward the sect, and he didn't participate in the upcoming grand competition, Yunhee's sect would likely miss out on vital resources. Yet Zilly furrowed her brows. Elder Yun, there is no need to be so harsh. Moore has always treated here well. Here is pure-hearted. How could she slander anyone? At this, Yun Buki let out a cold laugh. Elder Zilly, you are quite the master. You won't even stand up for your own disciple. And based on one side of the story, you allow him to suffer in the cold prison? Though the cold prison is a punishment, it can also help disciples temper their bodies. If a little hardship makes him resentful, then he isn't fit to be my disciple. Zilly maintained her aloof demeanor as if untouched by worldly affairs, which only made Yun Buki's face twist with anger. He glanced at Liu He and said, "Sect Master, I request to perform a soul search." Liu He's face immediately drained of color at his words, her pale lips trembling, unable to make a sound. A soul search, though a nascent soul peak expert's soul search, wouldn't cause her significant harm. It was known to be excruciatingly painful, no less than the cruelest torture. How dare you? Zilly stood up, her beautiful eyes locking directly onto Yun Buki. Our fight is one thing, but you dare lay a hand on my disciple? Yet Yun Buki remained unwavering. So what? She is your disciple. But isn't Yumu also your disciple? The sect master rubbed his temples, clearly troubled, waving his hand to signal them to sit down. Enough! Elder Zilly. Why not use the Zhuanshan mirror? Though it's a one-time use treasure, when compared to a disciple like Yumu, surely you understand which is more important. He added, afterward, Elder Yun and I will make sure you're compensated. Upon hearing this, Zilly's expression soured. The Zhuanshan mirror. It required the combined power of 3 nascent soul peak cultivators to activate, and could indeed reveal glimpses of the past or future. But it was an irreplaceable treasure in her possession. Still, given the current situation, there was no other choice but to use it for Yumu's sake. As his master, she couldn't let her disciple suffer unjustly. If there was truly an injustice, she had to stand up for him. With a sigh, she produced an ancient mirror from her sleeve. Kneeling nearby, Liu He watched as the 3 powerful cultivators began channeling their spiritual energy into the ancient mirror. Her heart grew increasingly conflicted. She didn't want to see senior brother suffer, nor did she want him to be falsely accused. But if he were truly innocent, and she had wronged him, would he come to hate her? It would almost be easier if senior brother were guilty. Then her testimony wouldn't be false. At that moment within the mirror, as the 3 nascent soul elders infused their power into it, the events from that day at the earth vein began to replay. The 13 disciples patrolled, while I and Liu He sat in meditation at the edge of the earth vein. But just then, something unexpected happened. A faint pink mist suddenly appeared out of nowhere, and the 13 patrolling disciples were killed almost instantly, swift and clean. Seeing this, the faces of Yunhee's sect's high-ranking members darkened immediately. It wasn't Yumu. To kill 13 mid-foundation establishment disciples in an instant, Yumu was capable, but not with such speed and precision. Moreover, that strange pink mist was an unfamiliar method, something none of them had ever seen before. Then something even stranger happened. The space around the earth vein seemed to split apart. In the ancient mirror, I appeared to have noticed something suspicious, and I drew my sword and gave chase. As for Liu He, she had only just reached the foundation establishment stage and was utterly helpless. Under the influence of the pink mist, she seemed to lose her sense of reason. She only saw the 13 disciples fall and caught a glimpse of my back. She didn't notice the figure wrapped in pink mist, standing not far away, devouring the earth veins energy in a short amount of time. And then, suddenly, the ancient mirror shattered into pieces. Zilly's face also darkened. The earth vein energy had been cultivated by the sect for years, and she had played a major role in its growth. She never expected that an external enemy had broken in and framed her disciple for it. Yun Buki glanced sideways at Zilly. So, the truth has come to light. The sect master's face flushed with embarrassment. From the beginning, I had said that I had discovered a strange figure and pursued it, but the sect master had put too much confidence in Yunhee sect's defenses. Now, with the Zhuanshan mirror revealing everything, the truth was finally clear. It seems we were indeed negligent, allowing our nephew Yumu to suffer an unjust accusation. We will certainly root out the villain and restore the honor of Yunhee sect. As the sect master spoke, his gaze shifted towards Zilly and Liu He. Elder Zilly, Yumu's earlier compliance was very strange. He is not one to yield so easily. And the things he said, along with how he even pushed away the junior sister he's doted on for 10 years. It seems this matter has truly hurt him. Zilly nodded. Yes, I understand what needs to be done. He has never defied me before. I will personally go to the cold prison and bring Yumu back. If I do that, even if he harbors resentment, he should be grateful in the end. Shortly after, the leadership of Yunhee sect made a public announcement to the entire sect and imposed some symbolic punishment on Liu He. There was no other way. She was under Zilly's protection. But the entire Yunhee sect was in a state of joy and celebration. I told you, Senior Brother Yu is not that kind of person. Exactly. How could Senior Brother Yu ever commit such a heinous crime? There must have been some villain stirring up trouble behind the scenes. Plus, we're counting on Senior Brother Yu for the upcoming Northwest competition. Those so-called prodigies from other sects are nothing compared to Senior Brother Yu. They don't even stand a chance against him. As the others celebrated, Yitia joined in with a joyful expression, but inside, he was filled with fear. The Zhuanshan mirror. They actually brought out the Zhuanshan mirror? That's an irreplaceable treasure. The moment that mirror appears, it reveals everything. My plan to frame Yumu is completely ruined now. Plus, the Zhuanshan mirror can lock onto specific energies. I'll have to delay refining the earth veins energy. Otherwise, if I'm exposed, there will be no place for me, Yi Tia, in Yunhee sect. Currently, he had just reached the early golden core stage. But if he could successfully devour and refine the earth veins energy, he would reach the peak of golden core and possibly even break through to nascent soul. With that additional boost, he would shock the entire world. As he thought about it, Yitia clenched his fist tightly in secret. When the Northwest sect competition arrives, I will surely shine, overshadowing Yumu in every way. His fame and resources will be mine. He laughed darkly in his heart, a greedy glint flashing in his eyes. Even his master, senior sister, and junior sister will all be mine sooner or later. Meanwhile, in the cold prison, I looked at the heavenly Tao seed within my sea of consciousness. As long as I had this, I could say that in this life, Yi Tia was no longer the complete child of fate. Half of that fortune now resided in me. I had now pieced everything together. The reason I was able to return was because after defeating me, Yi Tia performed a blood ritual on this world in order to ascend. Naturally, the spirit of the heavenly Tao would also collapse along with it. In the final moment, the heavenly Tao spirit must have used all its power to reverse time, bringing me back. Its sole purpose being to save itself. As I thought of this, a contemptuous smile crept across my lips. It truly thinks I will, like in my previous life, sacrifice everything just to stop Yi Tian again? I have no desire to be a tool anymore. But where should I go now? In my previous life, Yun Buki, to protect me, was framed and ostracized. He fell in battle. And by the time I arrived, he was already lying among the corpses. Then there was the holy maiden of the demonic path, Su Qiwan. She always followed me, advising me not to lose my way, honoring me as her emperor. After the final battle, it was she who cradled my broken body and fled into the void. But even then, Yi Tia caught up with her, and with a fierce blast of wind, he shattered her with a single palm. Finally, there was Lu Xingye, the sword down master. When Yi Tia prepared to sacrifice the world in a blood ritual, Lu Xingye, wearing my demon emperor robes, stormed the sacred mountain, confronting those ignorant souls who were still helping Yi Tia with his blood ritual preparations. But he, too, was slain with a single stroke of Yi Tian's sword. Even until the day the world shattered, his body was still hanging at the foot of the sacred mountain, though I believed all the flames in my heart had long been extinguished. Thinking of these people, it still caused a sharp pain in my chest. But wasn't my heart already dead? Why does it still hurt? Is it because the ground is too cold? Just then, a figure radiating warmth appeared before me, and a large cloak was draped over my shoulders. Yun Buki gently lifted my frozen body, wrapping me tightly in the cloak to shield me from the cold. His old eyes filled with concern. Silly child, this is not how you temper your body. It's so cold. He then reached out and softly brushed the ice and snow from my hair. When the sect master interrogated you earlier, I was still in closed cultivation. Otherwise, I wouldn't have allowed such a thing to happen. Don't think too much about it. Your master requested the Zhuanshan mirror on your behalf. The truth has been revealed. Thank you, Supreme Elder. I was still somewhat surprised by his words. They had even brought out the Zhuanshan mirror? It must have been due to the Supreme Elder's insistence on protecting me. I never thought that simply admitting guilt would alter the course of events from my previous life. Yun Buki slowly helped me to my feet, his eyes full of concern. You don't need to worry. You are the sect's greatest talent, and the sect will do everything to protect you. I will too. These words, I had heard them in my previous life as well. They weren't empty promises, but something Yun Buki spent his entire life proving. At this moment, the heart I thought had long frozen over felt a slight warmth. Seeing my silence, Yun Buki continued to smile and explain. Originally, Elder Zili was supposed to come fetch you herself, but your junior brother Yi Tian encountered some issues with his cultivation, so she had to attend to him. And I felt that sending an ordinary disciple to retrieve you would be beneath your dignity, so I took it upon myself to come personally. You mustn't hold it against this old man. Now, Supreme Elder, how could I? I grasped Yun Buki's hand tightly. After all, my blood was still warm. After all, there was still kindness in this world. I cared little for Zili's attitude toward me. She had always favored Yi Tia, while benefiting from my presence. Such a person wasn't worth caring about. But as for Yun Buki, how could I remain cold and indifferent toward him? As I grabbed his hand, not only was Yun Buki surprised, I was even more surprised. Yun Buki had always worn a ring on his finger, a spatial storage ring capable of holding living things. He had always treasured it, but now the ring was gone. Unable to hold back, I asked, Supreme Elder, where is your ring? Don't bring it up. Elder Zili expended the Zhuanshan mirror. I couldn't not show some gesture in return. As long as you are safe, The future of Yunhee sect must not be burdened by injustice. Yunbuki continued to smile warmly, holding my hand tightly. In his mind, I had always focused solely on my own cultivation. I had never shown him such warmth before. But thinking about it, he reasoned that Zilly was a beauty, and she had the two famous beauties of Yunhee sect as her disciples. Why would I, a young man, care for an old man like him? I must have just been feeling wrong, and he was the first one to come to see me. With that thought, Yunbuki chuckled and tightened the cloak around me. Let's go! Child, hearing this, I smiled slightly. I don't wish to return to the sect just yet. Might I ask, Supreme Elder, if your Xingyun Hall could host a disciple for a while? Yunbuki's eyes lit up with joy. That's wonderful. You are always welcome at my hall. But in the next moment, he frowned slightly. Yumu had once said that the sect was his life, his home, and that no one could dishonor it in the slightest. He was the standard bearer of Yunhee sect's younger generation, and everyone envied Zilly for having such a great disciple. But now, it was clear that Yumu's heart had been deeply wounded. Still, considering everything, now that the truth had come to light, it was all for the sake of a newly joined disciple. Neither her master, senior sister, nor junior sister came to fetch him. How heartless and cold, Yunbuki thought. With that in mind, he immediately grabbed my wrist, and in a flash whisked me out of the cold prison. Come with me to my Xingyun Hall. Surely, I can make space for you there. He thought to himself, this disciple, if Yumu is willing, I might just have to compete with Zilly for him. As we traveled, Yunbuki seemed delighted, his voice still ringing in my ears. Little Moo, don't think that just because I couldn't outmaneuver your master all these years, that means I lack strength. Wait until I give you a grand gift. I smiled in response. Thank you for your generous gift, Supreme Elder. I wouldn't dare refuse. The atmosphere between the Elder and me was harmonious, and a bit of life returned to my eyes. But just then, someone appeared ahead of us. Seeing this, my smile remained, but the warmth in my eyes turned cold. Yitia greets Supreme Elder, and greets my senior brother. The person wore a green robe. Not as handsome as me, but still quite graceful. More importantly, he possessed an inexplicable charm, a confidence that came from somewhere unknown, and his smile was disarmingly pure. Yitia stepped forward and, in a soft voice, spoke, Senior brother, Master has requested your presence. Upon hearing this, I waved my hand dismissively. There's no need for you to call me senior brother anymore. You can return and tell her. There's no need for her to request me again. Yi Tian's face immediately filled with a look of hurt. Despite his youth, only around 15 or 16, that expression had a certain power to it. You're not upset because Master didn't come to the cold prison to get you, are you? It's all my fault. I ran into problems during my cultivation. If it weren't for my issues, Master would definitely have come to fetch you. She even mentioned you once. Inside, Yi Tian was filled with joy. Could this really be the moment when I finally push senior brother away? As long as senior brother leaves, there will be no more threats to me. Once I've fully refined the earth vein's energy, everything will be mine. At that point, the entire Yunhee sect, no! The entire Northwest will be mine. And the three beauties who seem to favor senior brother, they'll all be mine as well. They're for the taking. Yi Tian then pretended to lower his head, nervously wringing the fabric of his robe, as if I had wronged him somehow. Senior sister has just come out of seclusion, and so has sister Liu. They're all waiting for you, senior brother. But just as Yi Tian looked up, he saw me already standing in front of him, looking down at him from above. Even though he knew my cultivation had been sealed, Yi Tian couldn't help but feel his heart race uncontrollably. Tell them, they don't need to wait any longer. With that, I turned and walked away. Yunbuki followed quietly behind me. As we made our way to Xingyun Hall, Yunbuki stayed by my side in silence, neither offering words of comfort, nor speaking about anything else. He simply remained at my side, I looked up at the sky, and it seemed as though there was a gaze watching me from above, most likely the lingering will of the heavenly Tao spirit. Upon realizing this, I couldn't help but let out a cold laugh. Wasn't it you who created the child of fate in the first place? And in the end, he turned around and sacrificed you in a blood ritual. Funny, isn't it? It seemed the heavenly Tao sensed my thoughts. As dark clouds quickly gathered across the sky, I smiled at Yunbuki and said, "Supreme Elder, let's walk a little faster. It looks like it's going to rain." Yunbuki glanced at me with a knowing look, still wearing his ever-present cheerful smile, but subtly shifted his position, using his body to shield me from the oncoming wind. Though he still believed that I was simply upset with the sect for the time being. After everything that had happened, he had made up his mind to fight for me. For the next 3 days, I spent my time helping Yunbuki tend to the small farm. We worked from sunrise to sunset. During this time, Yunbuki no longer seemed like a high-ranking Supreme Elder, and I no longer resembled the unrivaled genius of the sect. We were like a simple grandfather and grandson, with no concern for cultivation, no care for the sect, and no thoughts of the schemes and deceptions of people's hearts. Suddenly, a faint fragrance drifted through the garden. Yunbuki and I immediately paused our work. Standing not far away was Zilly, her presence commanding and out of place in this humble vegetable garden. She stood like a rare jewel from another world, completely mismatched with the surroundings. She stared at me silently, her beautiful face showing no emotion, still as lofty and self-righteous as ever. After a moment, she furrowed her brow and spoke. "Muir, Elder Yun is the supreme elder of the sect. It's one thing for you to interrupt his cultivation, but to play around with him. What kind of behavior is this?" She had intended to say something more caring, but seeing the harmony between Yunbuki and me, for some reason, she felt deeply uncomfortable. "Elder Zilly, aren't you overstepping a bit?" Yunbuki dropped his shovel, positioning himself protectively in front of me, staring directly at Zilly. This is hardly the tone one should use when coming to retrieve a disciple. Hearing this, Zilly didn't even bother to glance at Yunbuki. "How I discipline my disciple is none of your concern." She then beckoned to me. "Muir, come here. Your master has come to take you back." Even now, she still thought of me as the disciple who would come whenever she called. Looking at the woman who, in my past life, had stabbed me in the heart, I found that the hatred, the questions, the grievances I had imagined feeling were absent. Instead, my heart was truly calm, without a single ripple of emotion. I stretched lazily, plucked 2 small cucumbers from the vine, and took a bite. "Master, you've come right on time. But isn't it a bit too early to pick me up?" Hearing this, Zilly stepped forward, and in an instant was standing right in front of me. A wave of overwhelming pressure crashed down upon me. "How dare you speak to your master like that?" Yunbuki moved to shield me, but to his surprise, I pulled him behind me instead. Though I no longer had my cultivation, I remained unfazed in the face of Zilly's nascent soul-level pressure. My once clear eyes now gleamed with a sudden red tint, and there was an indescribable violence lurking beneath the surface. "Master, this garden is Elder Yun's hard work. Don't destroy it." I stood a head taller than Zilly, and now I gazed down at her, with no hatred in my eyes. There was only endless indifference, as if a god was gazing down upon an ant. Hearing my words, Zilly was so shocked that she couldn't speak. The way I treated her now was nothing like before. Seeing her oppressive aura dissipate in her surprise, the red in my eyes also faded away. "This will be the last time I call you master." As I spoke, I tore a piece of fabric from my robe and tossed it at her feet. "From now on, we are no longer connected in any way. As for my cultivation at the peak of Golden Core, you can take it whenever you wish. I will rebuild it without issue. But my life is not yours to take. I still have a true master to honor." Zilly's beautiful eyes widened, and she hadn't even realized her body was trembling slightly. It was wrong of me, as your master, to allow such injustice to befall you. And it was indeed Kyr who was at fault. But didn't I bring out the Xuanshan mirror to clear your name? Your grievances have already been washed away. I didn't come to fetch you because your junior brother had an issue with his chest circulation. Muir, are you really going to sever our bond over such a small matter? And who is this master you claim you want to honor? At that moment, even Yun Buki was stunned. He had never seen the aloof Zilly immortal appear so humbled and submissive. Seeing this, a mocking smile spread across my lips. You chose to believe a one-sided story, yet refused to trust the disciple you raised from childhood. How grand and righteous you appear. Truly interesting. With that, I turned and respectfully bowed to Yun Buki. Disciple Yumu greets the true master. I am willing to take Yun Elder as my master. Through the ever-changing seas and sands, my heart remains unchanged. Suddenly, the entire garden seemed to pulse with an unsettling energy, coming from an unknown source, sending shivers through the air. Even Yun Buki was momentarily stunned, but he quickly regained his composure and helped me to my feet. Good. If others do not value such a prodigy, this old man will treasure him. From this moment on, you are one of my own, the fruit of my labor. Zilly stood there, frozen in disbelief. She had walked her path of cultivation without desires, without attachments. But in this moment, she felt as though something important, something irreplaceable, was slipping away, perhaps beyond her ability to ever retrieve. She then thought of my deep affection for Liu He, and my admiration for senior sister Ziyu. Desperately clinging to this thought like a lifeline, she cried out, Muir, I was wrong, and your junior sister are still waiting for you. Faced with Zilly's sudden and desperate plea, I only felt a wave of disgust welling up within me. How could I have been so foolish in my past life? Constantly manipulated, played like a pawn in their hands. Yun Buki, noticing my change in expression, initially thought I might have been moved with compassion. But as he continued to observe, it seemed more likely that I was about to strike someone. Thinking quickly, Yun Buki spoke up. Elder Zilly, please leave. You've entered my residence without proper notice, which is against protocol. Yumu, as the sect's chief prodigy, has the right to change his allegiance to my tutelage. I trust you wouldn't wish to violate the sect's 1,000-year regulations, Elder Zilly. Hearing this, Zilly glared at Yun Buki, her eyes burning with fury. It must be this old man who has bewitched Muir. He's always wanted to compete with me, and now that he couldn't win against me, he's using the disciple I value most to strike at me. However, Zilly knew this was not the moment to let her anger flare, or she would only push Muir further away. At that moment, many disciples witnessed the usually divine and aloof Zilly immortal, walking away like a lost soul, a shell of her former self. As I watched her departing figure, I felt no particular emotion rise within me, not even a trace of pity. I looked up at the sky, and my gaze seemed to meet that of the heavens themselves, as if locking eyes with a vast, invisible presence. Help me ... help me ... That immense yet frail voice seemed to echo from deep within my soul, but I paid it no mind. Wasn't the child of fate your own chosen one, heavenly Tao spirit? You expect me to keep being your tool, to clean up your mess again? You really think planting half a heavenly Tao seed in my soul will allow you to control me? After returning from Xingyun Hall, Zilly's mind was unsettled, and she couldn't sleep through the night. Even though her cultivation was supposed to transcend worldly matters, that night she experienced a heart demon's dream. In the dream, I stood alone, wielding a sword, protecting her. But from behind, she stabbed me through with her own blade. Awaking from the nightmare in a cold sweat, Zilly's chest heaved uncontrollably, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears, and a deep sense of confusion. What is this? How could Muir ever be an enemy of this world? And why would I ever betray him and attack him from behind? Meanwhile, at Xingyun Hall, Yun Buki had gone out early in the morning, without mentioning where he was going. He merely gave me a knowing smile. I knew, of course, that my master was likely off, preparing the grand gift he promised. Having officially transferred to Yun Buki's tutelage, there were still formal procedures within the sect I needed to complete. For now, though, I enjoyed my leisure, simply helping Yun Buki tend to his garden. Lying by the field, a blade of grass in my mouth, I thought to myself that once I returned to the demon realm, I should set up a few gardens like this one. Wouldn't that be delightful? Just then, a cold voice interrupted my thoughts. Senior brother, I looked up to see Ziyu with the ever-pitiful Liu He by her side. Standing not far from me, staring in my direction, a slight frown creased my brow. Ziyu! I'm seeing her again, huh? My feelings for this person had long grown cold. In my past life, she knew full well how I felt. Yet she kept stringing me along, never giving me any clear response. And in the end, she turned around and crawled into Yitian's bed. I had no desire to deal with them, so I stood preparing to leave. But in their eyes, it seemed as if I was acknowledging them. Especially Liu He. Her cheeks flushed as she gazed at me, though a hint of sadness lingered in her eyes. Senior brother, does this mean he's willing to forgive me? Is it because senior sister Ziyu stepped in? Ziyu, leading Liu He, approached, softening her voice as much as possible. Junior brother, I've learned a little more about what happened before. The sect truly wronged you. Now that the truth has been revealed, why not come back with senior sister? Ziyu hesitated for a moment, then extended her slender, pale hand toward me. But the hand I had once longed to hold countless times no longer stirred any feelings within me. I have already taken Yun Buki as my master and entered Xingyun Hall. From now on, I have no further ties to your sect. Do not persist. With that, I turned to leave. However, Ziyu grabbed my arm. Junior brother, this is not up to you. Anger flared in Ziyu's heart. She had already lowered herself, but now the one who once admired her was treating her with such indifference. She couldn't accept it. Moreover, if Yun Buki returned, and the sect's formalities were completed, I would be officially under Yun Buki's tutelage, and there would be no turning back. Even as she pulled at me, I did not resist. Instead, I locked my cold gaze on her. Let go! When Ziyu met my emotionless eyes, she, a golden core prodigy, felt an inexplicable fear. What kind of gaze is this? Behind her, Liu He was even more shaken. She had never seen senior brother like this. Junior brother, your life was saved by our master. Without her, you would have long been buried among common folk. Hearing this, I shook off her hand and replied with disdain. I can return it to her, but let's see if she has the ability to take it. At that moment, the heavenly Tao seed within my sea of consciousness fully sprouted, and the seal left within my body shattered instantly. A surge of newfound power, like a rebirth, was unleashed within me. And this new power was far more refined than before. It seems that the heavenly Tao spirit wasn't just watching me. It actually provided me some benefits as well. At the same time, Ziyu sensed the immense force within me. Her delicate brows furrowed sharply. Wasn't your cultivation sealed? Junior brother, are you thinking of attacking me? The moment she said this, a sense of sadness welled up inside me. I had merely hesitated for a second, and Ziyu immediately assumed I was going to strike her. It seems that, even after being given a second chance, these people still wouldn't trust me. If that's the case, I no longer need to hold on to any feelings for them. This is the last time I'm telling you. Do not provoke me again. In an instant, I unleashed a terrifying aura of killing intent, pushing Ziyu several meters back, dragging the pale-faced Liu He along with her. Then, without a second glance, I transformed into a streak of light and vanished, leaving behind Liu He stomping her feet in frustration and a stunned Ziyu. When Ziyu finally regained her senses, her eyes were filled with conflicting emotions. They had come as far as they could. Had they dared to trespass into Yun Buka's hall, it would have given him the perfect excuse, and not even their master could protect them fully. Moreover, she knew my true strength and could clearly feel the killing intent from moments ago. She was absolutely certain that, had she pressed further, I would not have hesitated to strike. What she couldn't understand was why her once gentle and kind junior had turned into this cold, distant figure. It seemed the bond between us as fellow disciples had come to an end. On her way back to Xian Hall, even Ziyu herself hadn't realized the change in her own heart. Her heart ached faintly, but what exactly was causing this pain? She didn't know. Senior sister. A deep, magnetic voice interrupted. Liu He looked up to see Yi Tia standing before her, gently wiping away the tears on her face. At that moment, Liu He could no longer hold back. She threw herself into Yi Tian's arms and burst into sobs. Senior brother will never return. Yi Tia embraced the delicate, tearful Liu He, his eyes filled with satisfaction. It's alright, you still have me. I'll do better than him. Meanwhile, in my meditation chamber, I sat cross-legged on the mat, having regained my cultivation. Though this restored power was insignificant compared to my peak, it was still enough to fight against golden core cultivators. Through my internal vision, I saw that the heavenly Tao seed had already taken root and sprouted deep within my sea of consciousness. The biggest effect of this seed on me was that anything I saw could also be seen by the heavenly Tao spirit through my perspective. The remnant spirit could also communicate with me through this seed. Just then, a familiar aura approached from afar. I quickly stood and respectfully bowed. Greetings, Master. As your spiritual energy gathered, forming Yun Buka's figure as he lifted me up. Little Moo, there's no need for such formality. Look at what your master has brought you. With a proud smile, Yun Buka spoke, and suddenly a long spear appeared. A purple dragon coiled along the length of the spear, accompanied by a sound like the cry of a dragon. An overwhelming aura of destruction and killing intent surged forth instantly. I gazed at the spear, a look of astonishment filling my eyes. This is the demon spear that was sealed beneath the spirit ruins. Wen. In my previous life, this very spear had accompanied me, fighting alongside me for thousands of years. Could it be that in the mysterious workings of fate, it has returned to me? It seems it still chooses to follow me. In the midst of Yun Buka's surprised expression, Tianwen inexplicably grew quiet. Seeing this, he laughed heartily. Excellent. It seems the spear is indeed fated to be with you. I had worried the weapon spirit might reject you, but clearly I was overthinking it. With that, I knelt on one knee before Yun Buka. Disciple thanks Master. At that moment, I felt that the things I had once lost were beginning to return. The heart that had once fallen felt a bit warmer. Yun Buka waved his hand and pulled out 2 jars of fine wine, saying, My disciple, tonight, with your cultivation restored and this divine weapon in hand, we must drink to our heart's content and not stop until we're both drunk. That night, after settling my completely inebriated master, I stood alone at the highest point of Xingyun Hall, just as I once stood at the peak of the Demon Realm's mountains, the Demon Emperor alone wielding his spear against the heavens. But this time, I wasn't alone. This time, I owed nothing to anyone. Everything you've taken from me, I will return to you. With those words, I turned toward Xian Hall in the distance, gripping Tianwen in my hand. Instantly, countless streams of spiritual energy broke free from my body, the aura of my dissipating cultivation forming an invisible wave that swept across the entire Yunhe sect. Sensing this power, the entire sect was thrown into shock, especially the disciples of Xian Hall, who were startled out of their cultivation, looking up in panic. This is Senior Brother's aura. He's dispersing his cultivation. As a golden core cultivator, dispersing one's main cultivation method is equivalent to starting over from scratch. Liu He's eyes instantly filled with tears. She looked toward Xingyun Hall, her lips trembling with inaudible whispers. Ziyu's beautiful eyes were now filled with rage. Junior brother has dispersed his Tian profound art. He's betrayed our master and turned his back on the sect. In his cultivation chamber, Yitia also felt the surge of power. His entire body was shrouded in demonic energy. Gone was the obedient demeanor from earlier in the day. Sensing the energy, a mocking grin crept across his lips. Dispersing his cultivation? He's really digging his own grave. Meanwhile, Zilly, still in seclusion, bit her lip lightly. Mooer, what did I do wrong? That you would treat me like this? The act of me dispersing my cultivation had naturally caused an uproar throughout Uni sect. I had been the only one in my generation to reach the great perfection stage of Golden Core, destined to dominate the Northwest for years to come. They had relied on me to solidify Uni sect's position in the region. Now, this loss was something they could not accept. Soon enough, the sect's upper echelons gathered, and a bewildered Yun Buki was called in. At first, Yun Buki was shocked to learn of my dispersing cultivation. But soon, he understood my intentions. I had resolved to sever all ties with Zilly and her line. The sect master, seated at the head of the gathering, was beside himself, beating his chest in frustration. Yun Elder, Yumu has now transferred under your tutelage, and this is how you protect such a prodigy. How could you allow him to disperse his cultivation? The other high-ranking members, including Zilly, cast cold glares at Yun Buki. Faced with the tension, Yun Buki calmly took a sip of his tea and said, I must say, at your age, why are you still so rash and impatient? At these words, Zilly could no longer contain her emotions. Yun Elder, I told you just the other day to return more to me, but you insisted on keeping him in your ragged little garden. Now look what's happened. Yun Buki, having set down his teacup, leaned forward slightly, and a palpable pressure filled the room. You conveniently forget the injustices Moore has suffered. You never cherished or protected him. So where's the harm in this old man treasuring him? The sect master, seeing the two about to engage in a verbal duel, rubbed his temples and interrupted. Enough! The situation is what it is. You two need to stop bickering. Yun Elder, can you recall check you? And Zilly Elder. It seems you will have no choice but to send Ziyu to represent your line in the competition. The honor of Yunhee must not be compromised. At the sect master's words, both Yun Buki and Zilly fell silent. Check you was Yun Buki's eldest disciple, but in the upcoming Northwest sect competition, all participants had to be under 50 years old. This year happened to be Chequest's 50th birthday, and even if they could recall him in time, he might not make it back before the event. Zilly, on the other hand, was even more troubled. Ziyu was difficult to command, and while she was a golden core cultivator, her practice of the emotionless Tao meant she couldn't wield her full power until she reached the nascent soul stage. Only Yumu was truly the top talent among Yunhee sect's younger generation. The sect master was troubled by this fact. Knowing that he had no other disciples worthy of representing the sect, there was little else he could do about it. In the days that followed, my cultivation not only didn't fall, but I directly broke through to the golden core stage. I had fully mastered the 9 departures demon heart art, a top-tier heavenly grade technique. Perhaps due to the demonic nature of this cultivation method, there was now an indescribable aura of wickedness around me. In recent days, the Supreme Elder had been overly concerned about my dispersing of cultivation, so sneaking into his garden, I quietly helped myself to a few spirit fruits. When Yun Buki saw me, he immediately flew into a rage, grabbing his shovel. Hey, you little rascal! They're not ripe yet. Not ripe, I tell you. But as he came closer, the expression on Yun Buki's face suddenly changed. Golden core stage? He circled around me in disbelief. In just a few days, not only did your cultivation not fall, but you broke through? No, something's off. Little Moo, where did you get this cultivation technique from? Why does it feel so strange? I waved my hand and smiled. Master, Your disciple has his own fortuitous encounters. Yun Buki gave me a meaningful look, but didn't press further. However, he couldn't quite understand why. Though I seemed perfectly normal, there was always this heavy air of killing intent around me. Sensing that my aura was too intense, I quickly ran over to Yun Buki and began massaging his shoulders. Qianwen is, after all, a demon spear. Its aura of malevolence is still too heavy. Just then, the ancient bell of the sect suddenly rang. Yun Buki, upon hearing it, knew immediately that this was the call to select participants for the upcoming competition. He hurriedly led me toward the main hall of the sect. Inside the Yunhe Grand Hall, the sect master and several of the elders had gathered again, each accompanied by their prized disciples. Zili was also present, with Ziyu and Yitia standing behind her. But when Zili looked at me standing behind Yun Buki, her eyes still held a trace of sorrow. In recent days, she had been plagued by heart demons, and compared to before, she looked noticeably more haggard. Ziyu, on the other hand, stared at me intently, her gaze filled with hatred. To her, I was nothing more than a traitor now. Yitia cast a brief glance at me, but quickly lowered his head, his eyes filled with shock and wariness. How is this possible? How could he have such strong fortune? Meanwhile, the sect master of Yunhe was in a rather good mood. He had been closely monitoring the situation at Xingyun Hall, and recently, he had sensed the surge in my powerful cultivation. Not only had I not regressed in cultivation, but I had actually broken through to the golden core stage. It seemed that Yunhe sect's chances in the Northwest sect competition were now secure. The sect master's smile grew wider at the thought. Everyone relax, he said. The Northwest sect competition is just around the corner. Today, we are gathered here simply to confirm the participants for the event. As expected, the sect master's gaze immediately fell on me. Are you still willing to fight on behalf of the sect? At that moment, all eyes turned to me once again. Among them, Yi Tian's gaze was filled with defiance, especially since he could sense that Zili's exhaustion was somehow related to me. That jealousy burned so intensely, it threatened to consume him. Facing the sect master's expectant gaze, I instead looked towards Yun Buki. Yun Buki patted my hand gently, his smile warm and kind. Go on, he said. You are the rightful heir of Yunhe sect. Bringing honor to the sect is your duty. Seeing this, I bowed to Yun Buki, then nodded toward the sect master. Yumu, accepting the task. I was merely doing this to make my master happy. The whole situation felt oddly like humoring a child. The thought brought a subtle smirk to my lips, an amused expression forming as I lightly massaged Yun Buki's shoulders. At that moment, Yun Buki couldn't help but feel proud. Meanwhile, Ziyu scoffed from a distance, displeased by the harmony between us. If it weren't for our master, and if not for Xian Hall, where would Yumu be today? She had wanted Zili to speak up, but upon looking at Zili, she saw that her former celestial grace was gone. Now her eyes were filled with sorrow. Muir, he used to treat me the same way. How did this once enviable relationship between master and disciple come to such an end? Since entering the hall, he hadn't even spared us a single glance. Not even once. The sect master then shifted his gaze toward Zili. Zili Elder, let's see you and Yitia also participate in the competition. After all, it's the effort that counts, isn't it? Hearing this, Zili nodded absent-mindedly, her gaze still lingering on me. The sect master then selected for more elite disciples, completing the roster for the competition. After some polite farewells, the meeting was adjourned. As I was walking out of the grand hall, Yitia hurriedly trotted up to me. The young master is truly imposing. What great fortune you have. Hearing this, I couldn't be bothered to acknowledge Yitia, so I simply flicked my sleeve, brushing him aside. As expected, Ziyu was quick to catch him, and Yitia took the opportunity to lean into her, feigning the frailty of a delicate scholar. Before Ziyu could protest, I cut her off. What now? Are you going to say he's just a child? If I recall correctly, during my first experience descending the mountain, I was younger than him. Yet it was I who stood between you and a beast to protect you. Why didn't you see me as a child back then and let me hide in your arms? Hearing this, Ziyu fumed but couldn't find the words to respond. Yumu, don't go too far. Her words brought a smile to my face. Oh, take good care of him. You'll see what comes of it soon enough. With that, I turned my back on them and walked away. Isn't it quite the reward? Offering yourself willingly to dual cultivate with Yitia, then sacrificing yourself as a furnace to help him forge a divine weapon, and in the end, not even earning the right to become a spirit within the artifact. Ziyu stood frozen in place, furious. Yet when she faced me, she couldn't help but feel an inexplicable pressure, no matter what she did. It seemed like she could never get the upper hand. In the end, for reasons unknown, she suddenly pushed Yitia away. He ran towards the direction of Xian Palace.